Hi, my name is Mary Kasaka, and I would just like to share with you today a tutorial on making apple pie. It's almost Thanksgiving, and I know a lot of people will want to have something homemade. When you're watching this, even if it's not almost Thanksgiving, it's always time to give thanks. So this recipe is a recipe I got from my mom. The crust recipe comes all the way down from my grandmother. It's a pie that I grew up on. My mom was the primo pie maker. So the first thing we're going to start with is our dry ingredients. Flour and salt are the dry ingredients. What I want to show you, you need to sift your flour. Back in the day, my mom sifted her flour like this with one of those little sifters. We don't need to do that. I learned a trick. This is 21st century baking. This is equivalent to sifting your flour, just using a wire whisk. If you don't have a whisk, a fork will do just fine. It just loosens up the flour, breaks it apart so you don't have clumps, okay? Sifted flour, we need 2 cups. You always want to measure and dump into the cup and then level it off. I usually give it a little shake like that. There's 1 cup and it goes into the food process. 2nd cup. Now this pie crust is actually going to make enough for two 1 pie shells or a bottom and a top. We're going to be making the apple pie that my family loves is Crumbly Top Apple Pie, so it's going to have a crumbly top on it. So we're only going to use half of this recipe. The other thing you need is a teaspoon of salt. So you just put that in. The first thing I would do is just give it a really quick pulse just to mix those 2 ingredients. Okay. Then we're going to take this off and we're going to put in the butter. Now, my grandmother's recipe says lard or shortening. And again, like I said, I don't use lard or shortening. I use butter because butter is amazing. So this is cold and it's been cubed into little pieces like this. Yeah, little pieces. So you're just going to dump that in and we're going to work that into the dough. This is the part where my mom would do it with a fork. God bless her. And I'm sure it's got benefits to doing that. I am using food processor. Okay, it's pretty much all mixed in. So the next thing we need is some liquid in here. The recipe calls for mixing a combination of a 1/4 cup of flour in a bowl with 5½ tablespoons of ice water, ice cold water. So that's what I have here is ice floating in some water, and I'm just going to dip my tablespoon in and get 5½ tablespoons out, put it into this bowl of flour. There's 3, 4, 5½ Okay, and use a fork there just to mix that up. Try to get lumps out of it. You can see. Alrighty, flour and ice cold water. And now we're just going to pour that in while this thing is on, and you can watch and see the dough form as we're doing this, okay? See, I missed some of the flour at the bottom, but it's all going in. It's all good, as they say. Okay, we're going to let the food processor make up for my mistakes. See that, how it forms into a ball eventually? Okay, pie crust is done. Now we just have to roll it out and get it into a pan. Now, one thing I do want to say is that you ever heard the saying, easy as pie? When people talk about something as easy as pie, I say they've never done this. I don't find this to be so easy and so quick. I think people who say easy as pie use these. Now, I have used these before. That's why I have this in my freezer. And as far as I'm concerned, it's still better than store-bought. To use one of those pie crusts, put your own homemade stuff into the pie, still works. But especially for Thanksgiving, for special holidays, I go the whole way with the butter crust. Okay, so we're gonna dump this over here and roll it out. All right, so here's the pie crust we just made. And we're gonna roll this out. Now, one thing to remember, this is the whole batch of it. So it is enough for 2 shells, either 2 bottoms, you know. Now this is actually a large dish and it's deep. So this is going to require more than half of my batch, but if you're using a thinner, you know, small 8 or 9 inch pie crust shell or pie crust pan, it would cover 2 bottoms or a bottom and then a top. For our crumbly top, we're gonna only need a bottom and we need more than half of this, okay? So again, I'm sure I'm handling this way more than my mom would say it's okay, but so instead of half, I'm gonna go a little more than half so that I have enough to cover that larger bowl or larger pie dish. Okay, and then we're gonna just give it some rolling. Okay, so I'm not gonna butter or put any kind of spray or oil on this pie dish because butter in the crust. So it's really never necessary. Any of you really great bakers out there who make everything look delicious, maybe you'll wanna just listen and not watch. Because I am no pro, but again, a little goes a long way. So I'm just gonna put this in. My mom would trim off the edges and then flute them. Sometimes I do that, but you know what, to be honest, my favorite part of a pie always is the crust, and I'm sure it's because I was raised on my mom's pies. So, so I'm just gonna leave it all on and flute it. It's really very not gorgeous. I don't care. But seriously, that's about how fast that goes. Now the pie shell is ready. Okay. Next we'll be making the pie filling. So there's 3, and because I'm making apple pie, apples will get brown really quick, so the last thing I'm going to do is cut those apples. Okay, so this is step 1, and I'll show you steps 2 and 3 in a minute. Steps 2 and 3 are the sugar mix that sugar and cinnamon you're going to put on your apples, and then the crumbly topping. You want to get all that prepared before you slice any apples. Okay, so first is the sugar that's going to go onto the apples. This is just a 1/4 cup of sugar, your basic white sugar. Mine is actually a mix of white and probably raw sugar that I got at Trader Joe's or something. It's just what I have in my container. So 1/4 cup of sugar, 3/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon, okay, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. Most of us don't have 1/8 of a teaspoon measuring thing. 1/8 is 1/2 of a 1/4 of a teaspoon. There's your math lesson for the day. You could also say a pinch of salt. We're gonna mix that together, okay? For the third part, the crumbly top that's gonna go on top. A lot of times I use this type of thing to mash in the butter, or you could use a fork, or you could use a food processor. So this right here is 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and 3/4 cup of sifted flour. We're going to mix those together real briefly just to get those to combine. Okay, and then we're going to add in more butter. See, now you know why my friends love this recipe. Butter. This is 1/3 cup of butter, and again, it's in little cubes, and it's cold. Okay? Now this, it's not so critical to not work it a lot. That's with the pie crust. This is Crumbly Top. It doesn't really matter. You can work it as much as you want. Yep, I'd say that's all mixed together, okay? So those two things have to be done before you start peeling and chopping apples, because you don't want your apples sitting around getting brown. And I'm not going to add lemon to them like some people do. We'll add lemon juice or lemon water, soak them in that, because then you're introducing another flavor. So I don't want to do that. So I get all of my other things prepared ahead of time. Okay. All right, we're now down to the last step for the apple pie. And like I said earlier, this is the step we leave for the last, because these apples will become brown rather quickly, and we don't want that to happen. So I always like to use green apples. They're nice and crisp and tart, and that way you don't end up with something that's just too sweet. So I am going to peel. The recipe that I got from my mom calls for 4 cups of apples, right up to about here. I always do more. Plus I am using, as you saw earlier, my pie shell is a deep one, and it's large. So I will probably fill this up high.
Cool.
Okay, so I've peeled, cored, sliced my apples. Did it pretty quickly. This is all the brown that's happening. These are huge green apples, so I had 6 of them. I used 4 of them, and look at how much it gave me. So you can see I go much higher than 4 cups for the apples. Okay, and I like them a little thick. You know, I just like crunchy and big pieces of apples. So you dump those into a big bowl, and then remember we made this. This is the white sugar, cinnamon, and a dash of salt. See how much that is? It's really not a lot of sugar. And that's going to go on all of these apples. I may cut up a few extras and add these in, because I don't, to be honest, don't remember exactly how much I use usually. I just know it's more than 4 cups. This was our step 1, our pie shell, or if you're not feeling that adventuresome, you use the frozen one. And this is a large shell. So here goes the apples. If I end up with too many, well, then I won't put them in. Time for some hands, some clean hands. Okay, look at that. I'd say that's good. Right here, we did this in the food processor, Crumbly, and we're just going to sprinkle this on top. And where there are gaps, some of it gets down inside. Meanwhile, by the way, I have my oven preheating. That takes about 10 minutes. It's preheating at 375. See how these crumbles just get all over the apples, all over the pie. All that butter in here is going to melt nicely. Get it all in. Voila! This is ready for the oven now. I have a few more minutes to go on the preheat. I'm going to pop it in the oven. Meanwhile, let me just show you a little trick. This is something I learned from my mom, Jean Thompson. So there was a little bit of extra pie dough, or pie crust dough, and she never let anything go to waste. And a lot of times, if I have extra, I would freeze it, wrap it in some saran wrap, and put it in the freezer, and then I have a pie crust ready to go. But it wasn't enough for a pie crust, because remember, this is large, and I used more than half for this pie. So she would take it and roll it out, and she would put like spread butter on half of it. I didn't do that because there's butter in the dough, but and she would sprinkle cinnamon and sugar, fold it over and cut it into these slices and bake this into the oven while the pie is baking, of course for a lot less time. My adaptation is I didn't do butter on the dough, but I did use maple syrup instead of sugar. Maple syrup, and spread it around on half the dough, and then I sprinkled some cinnamon and nutmeg, and I chopped up some walnuts and folded it over, cut it in these slices, and that's going to go in. And this, maybe, I don't remember how long these take, maybe 10 minutes at the same temperature. They're going to go into the oven at the same time. But these, because my mom's dough is so amazing, these are my favorite part. I would eat this over the pie any day. So anyway, I'm going to clean this up around the edges a little bit and get her in the oven, and we'll be back soon. Okay, I've preheated my oven for about 10 minutes at 375 degrees. So I'm gonna, and I cleaned up around the edges, make this look a little nicer. So we're gonna put the pie in. And then right below it, there's a little bit of room. Go those, okay? I think that those little dough strips will be probably about 10 minutes. The pie is gonna take, could be 45. I usually check it at 42 minutes. That's just my oven. 42 minutes. And I'll show you when it comes out what we're looking for to know that it's done. Okay, we're ready to take our pie out of the oven. It's been in there for about 45 minutes. And check that out. It smells amazing in here. So what you're looking for, a little bit of a brown on top. The crust is just browning a little bit. These are also done. Oh, there's one missing. It's okay, they're really good. I had to check them, make sure they're good. These took about 20 minutes or so. Again, you just want them to be a little bit brown. See, they're kind of nice and brown on the bottom. And these are amazing. There's your pie. So, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoy. I hope you give it a shot. It can't be worse than store-bought. Remember to give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. Happy Thanksgiving. God bless you.